You ever notice how some people walk into a room and instantly feel the air get heavier, like the noise and movement press against their skin? They're not bored, not shy in the cliché sense, not antisocial in the rebellious sense. It's more like their mind tightens its grip, whispering that they'd rather be anywhere else but here. And the strange part is, they're not broken for feeling that. There's actually a psychology behind it that's far more layered than most people ever assume. A lot of people think avoiding others comes from being cold or indifferent, but the truth is often the opposite. People who don't like being around people usually feel too much, not too little. Their nervous system doesn't stroll through social environments, it sprints. Imagine standing in a crowd and noticing every tiny shift in tone, every micro-expression, every half-finished sentence that could mean something or nothing. Your brain processes all of this at once, like an inbox overflowing every second. After a while, it doesn't feel like company, it feels like surveillance. You're watching everything, and everything feels like it's watching you back. And here's where it gets interesting. It's not always fear. Sometimes it's exhaustion dressed as indifference. Some people have a mind that works like a high-performance engine, sharp, fast, always analyzing. They don't dislike people. They just dislike how much energy it costs to navigate them. Even simple interactions can feel like tasks. Small talk feels like a tax. And forced proximity, like crowded rooms, feels like someone slowly turning up the volume on a song you never liked. There's a pattern many of these people fall into, and it's subtle. They're hyper-aware of social dynamics. They catch tension before it even forms, sense hostility before a word is spoken, and detect insincerity like a faint smell in the air. This isn't magic. It's a combination of environmental learning and psychological conditioning. Some grew up in homes where they had to stay alert, predict moods, anticipate reactions, stay ahead of conflict. Others grew up as observers, always slightly outside the circle, watching how everyone else played the game but never quite wanting to join in. This observer mindset is powerful, but it comes with a cost. When you're always analyzing, it's hard to simply experience. And when you can't just be in a space, the space becomes draining. It's like trying to relax at a table where you're also the one subconsciously counting every fork, tracking every conversation thread, scanning for every shift in the room. This is where Machiavelli becomes unexpectedly relevant. He understood that people who step back from the crowd often see more clearly than those in the middle of it. When you're not constantly immersed in the noise, you notice patterns others miss, motives, emotional currents, power dynamics. But that clarity comes from distance. And for many people, that distance isn't optional. It's the only way they can think straight. They retreat not because they dislike humanity, but because stepping back is how they keep their mind from getting tangled. Another reason some people hate being around others is the instinctive need for control, not in a manipulative sense, but in a physiological one. Being around groups introduces unpredictability. Unpredictability means your brain feels compelled to stay alert. Social environments have 1,000 moving parts, and every moving part feels like a potential threat to your peace. People talking over each other, sudden laughter, someone entering the room, someone leaving, someone getting too close, someone calling your name unexpectedly. Your brain treats each one like a tiny spark, and enough sparks start to feel like a fire. And here's the twist many never consider. Some people who hate being around others are actually incredibly good with people. They might communicate well, read emotions well, even be charming when necessary. But their social skill is often a learned performance, not a comfortable state. It's like they've mastered the choreography, but never truly enjoy the dance. They know how to talk, how to engage, how to appear composed, but every minute of it drains their battery. Once they're alone, it's like taking off heavy armor. It's also worth noting that the dislike of being around others isn't always about other people. It's sometimes about identity. When you're alone, you're fully yourself. No adjustments, no masks, no strategic silences, no polite smiles. But around others, you unconsciously shift. Even the smallest version of self-monitoring, adjusting tone, pacing, posture, chips away at your energy. Multiply that by hours, and you start to feel like a ghost wearing a human suit. There's another layer, too. People who avoid company often have a deep sensitivity to emotional atmospheres. They absorb moods like sponges. If someone nearby is agitated, they feel it. If someone's insincere, they notice it. If someone is quietly hurting, they sense that weight. This emotional permeability makes group environments overwhelming. Imagine walking through a marketplace where every stall sells a different emotion, and you inhale all of them, whether you want to or not. Some people grow aware of this sensitivity early, and they start to avoid overwhelming environments before they even fully understand why. Others only realize it later in life, when they finally get a taste of what true mental quiet feels like. Maybe during a period of isolation or a phase of deep introspection. Once they feel that quiet, returning to constant exposure feels painful. Here's something rarely talked about. Many people who dislike social environments actually crave connection, but on their terms. They like depth, not density. They prefer one person they trust over 20 acquaintances. They want conversations that feel like exploration, not obligation. Crowds make them retreat, but genuine understanding pulls them in. They don't hate people. They hate the environments people create. And often, when they do connect with someone, they do so intensely. They listen deeply, speak honestly, and absorb the other person's worldview with surprising clarity. But because this type of connection feels rare, they almost expect disappointment. Past experiences teach them that most interactions won't match this depth, so eventually they choose solitude over constant understimulation. There's also a large subset who simply think differently. Their mind is naturally reflective, drifting into abstract thoughts or personal analysis, even in the middle of conversations. They might zone out because their brain finds internal landscapes more compelling than the external ones. Crowds interrupt that internal flow. For someone whose mind is their favorite place, being forced into external noise feels intrusive. And underneath all of this, beneath the sensitivity, the vigilance, the emotional tuning, there's a quiet truth that many of these people share. Solitude gives them clarity, not just comfort, clarity. It's where they hear themselves think without interference, where ideas unfold naturally, where their emotional pulse steadies, where their identity feels whole instead of divided. And once a person tastes clarity long enough, chaos, no matter how harmless, feels like something they'd rather avoid. Solitude becomes less of a preference and more of a psychological home. They don't need to explain why they like it. They just know that when they step into it, everything that felt tangled suddenly lines up again. Sometimes it's not about disliking people, but about protecting the mind that has carried them this far. Even then, it's not as simple as, I prefer being alone. There's a hidden architecture behind it, a structure of habits, instincts, and invisible thresholds. People who hate being around others often build their lives around avoiding unnecessary overstimulation. They choose specific stores where they know the layout by heart. They avoid events where the social expectations are vague. They take routes with fewer interactions, fewer unknown variables, and they rarely admit it out loud, because to most people, it sounds dramatic, when to them, it's just efficient self-preservation. One of the most misunderstood aspects is how early this tendency can develop. Some children grow up learning that quiet isn't just peaceful, it's safe. If being around people meant dealing with unpredictability, arguments, sudden mood changes, subtle tensions, then solitude becomes associated with stability. That association can be so deeply wired that even in adulthood, the body reacts automatically. Loud gatherings trigger the same instinct as a childhood door slamming. Too many voices in a room feels like too many emotions to track. And this isn't something they consciously choose. It's something their nervous system remembers. But not all experiences that shape this mindset are negative. Sometimes it comes from having a rich inner world that was never quite matched by the outside. When your imagination is vibrant, when your thoughts feel like entire landscapes, being pulled into a noisy environment feels like being yanked from your home mid-sentence. Your mind resents the interruption. You don't hate people. You just hate losing your own train of thought to conversations that don't matter. There's a psychological nuance here that often gets ignored. Discomfort around people doesn't always stem from trauma or anxiety. Sometimes it comes from discernment. You simply understand your own bandwidth, and you know what drains it. Some personalities are structured like deep wells. They hold a lot, they feel a lot, but they refill slowly. Interactions dip into that well, and too many dips too quickly leave them empty. They recover in silence, not in company. And the more aware they become of this pattern, the more strategic they get with who gets access to them. There's also a tendency for these individuals to be hyper-responsible in interactions. They don't just talk, they manage the emotional tone, track the other person's comfort, fill silences when needed, soften their own intensity, adjust their words so they're received correctly. It's like playing 5 instruments at once during a conversation. So when they say they're tired, it's not an excuse, it's a data point. Their mind works overtime in social environments because they refuse to be careless with others, and that level of precision takes a toll. Many people like this share another trait, a quiet intolerance for superficiality, not because they're arrogant or judgmental, but because shallow interactions feel like eating cardboard. They're going through the motions without nourishment. They sense the masks people wear, the scripts they follow, the unspoken insecurities driving their behavior. And once you see the machinery behind everyday social rituals, it becomes hard to enjoy them. You don't hate people. You hate the performance everyone feels obligated to participate in. And then, there's the unpredictable element of temperament. Some people are simply wired to process stimulation more intensely. Their sensory threshold is lower, their emotional perception is higher, and their thoughts move in ways that don't always align with the pace of social life. When they walk into a room full of people, they're not just in a social environment. They're navigating sound, movement, energy, expectation, and subtle emotional cues all at once. That alone could drain anyone. This is why solitude feels like oxygen. It's not just quiet, it's alignment. When they're alone, their internal rhythm finally syncs with their environment. They can think at their own pace, listen to their own reactions, and move without filtering themselves. Solitude doesn't feel empty. It feels precise. It feels clean. It feels honest. People like this also tend to be highly reflective. After every interaction, they replay moments in their mind. Did I sound strange when I said that? Did they misunderstand my tone? Should I have phrased that differently? Most people move on, but reflective minds run diagnostics. They evaluate every detail, not because they're insecure, but because they value accuracy. They care about intention versus impact. And this habit, over time, makes socializing feel like studying for an exam you never signed up for. Yet, ironically, many of these same individuals are deeply loyal. When they choose someone, when they trust someone, they invest heavily. They're the ones who remember your offhand comments, who sense shifts in your mood before you speak, who hold your secrets with reverence. They don't like being around most people, but the few they allow in matter profoundly to them. Their aversion to crowds makes their rare connections feel almost sacred. There's also a quiet frustration that comes with this psychology. The world is built for the socially comfortable. Workplaces reward extroverted behavior. Friend groups form around shared activities. Even simple things, like asking a question at a counter or attending a gathering, can feel disproportionately draining. So people who dislike social environments often adapt by becoming hyper-capable. They plan ahead, anticipate issues, learn how to handle interactions efficiently, and then retreat again to refill. To outsiders, they may seem distant or overly independent, when in reality, they're simply trying to function without burning out. And let's address something that rarely gets spoken. Sometimes the person who hates being around others is also someone who has been repeatedly disappointed by them. They've dealt with betrayal, inconsistency, emotional volatility, or just chronic misunderstanding. Over time, they learn that solitude never lies to them. Solitude never shifts its mood or breaks its promises. It's predictable in a world full of variables. And once a person learns that peace can be found alone, the chaos of others becomes harder to tolerate. There's another layer, though, that runs even deeper. The conflict between wanting space and wanting understanding. People like this often crave someone who gets them without needing explanations. They want to be seen accurately, not decoded. But they also pull away from most people because the process of explaining themselves feels exhausting. It's a paradox, wanting closeness, but wanting it to be effortless, craving connection, but only one that doesn't drain them. And when they don't find that, solitude feels like the safer default. Machiavelli would have recognized something else in this type of mind, the instinct to retreat, to gain clarity, before making a move. People who think intensely often step away from social noise because they make better decisions in quiet. They process motives better, analyze dynamics better, and refine their strategies when they're alone. It's not avoidance, it's calibration. They leave the room so they can understand the room. Over time, this pattern becomes an identity. You stop seeing solitude as a break and start seeing it as the baseline. Socializing becomes the exception, not the rule. And here's the truth that many people won't admit, but silently feel. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone is built for constant proximity. Some minds bloom only in quiet. Some hearts function best in low traffic. Some souls just breathe better with space around them. But even with all this, there's still more to unravel about why certain people feel this way. Because the reasons stack and intertwine in ways most of us don't notice until we look closer.